Hello, Jane Roxana here, and this is my 6th show, and I'm talking about Genesis, Day 3, Part 2. And I'll be reading Genesis 1:11 through 13. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth," and it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 3rd day. Now, I like the way the New Defender's Study Bible notes expound on this. So what does it mean by bring forth grass? All right, the ability of the earth to begin immediately producing abundant life, plant life, everywhere on the very same day as the forming of the land surfaces, which was in the last show I did, shows that the upper portion of the crust was a rich soil, fertile in chemical nutrients and retaining adequate moisture to sustain the lush vegetation. This fact illustrates an important principle. True creation necessarily involves the theory of a creation of apparent age, or better yet, creation of functioning maturity. That is, the soil did not gradually form over hundreds of years by rock weathering and other modern uniformitarian processes. It was readied instantaneously by divine fiat. The plants did not develop from seeds. Rather, the herb was formed, yielding seed. Similarly, the fruit trees were yielding fruit, not requiring several years of preliminary growth as do modern fruit trees. So it's like if you were planting a garden. Instead of starting from scratch from seed, you would be going and putting in mature plants. All right, now the seed. The seed which God designed guaranteed reproduction of each plant after his kind. This phrase, repeated 9 more times in Genesis 1 after this first occurrence, obviously precludes transmutation of one kind into another. The seed was programmed for stable reproduction of each kind through a remarkable system known today as the genetic code, the complex information program in the DNA molecule. This system allows wide horizontal variation within the kind, but no vertical evolution from one kind into a more complex kind. It is significant that, despite widespread belief in evolution, no scientist has yet documented a single instance of true vertical evolution occurring today. The modern taxonomic equivalent of kind is probably broader than the species in many cases, since the latter term species is an arbitrary man-made category. That is, the many varieties of dogs are all part of the created dog kind, just as all tribes and nations of men constitute one mankind. All right, a few more verses I'm going to read. James 3:12 says, or asks the question, "Can the fig tree, my brethren, bear olive berries, either a vine figs?" All right. Now, when you ask children this, like, I have an apple seed here and I'm going to plant it. What do you think it's going to grow into? And you ask, is it going to grow into a pear tree? And the kids are all going to go, no. Is it going to grow into a grapevine? And the kids are all going to go, no. And you ask, well, what is the apple seed going to grow into? And they say, I know, an apple tree. That's right. All right. Okay. 1 Corinthians 15:38 says, God gives the plant the form he wants it to have. Each kind of seed grows into its own form. All right. Even scientists can't deny that fact. Now for the evolution of plants as proposed by evolutionists. I found this handy chart, and this chart was made by Richard Wheeler. And let's see if I can get a close-up of that. I don't know if you can see that right there. Anyways, it goes through very quickly how they feel that plants evolved from the lower forms. So it starts 1,600 million years ago with the cyanobacterium. Now, I talked about the cyanobacteria on an earlier show. If you want to go back and look at it, it's very interesting. Now, it was eaten by a unicellular eukaryote. Okay, now there's some hard scientific words in here I'm going to totally screw up. So just bear with me. I'm going to do my best. All right, and that became the first chloroplast. Now the chloroplast evolved into algae, red algae, and a couple kinds of green algae. Now this algae, I like the way he says it up here. This kind of really explains evolutionary theory right here, okay? Now things get exciting. One type of green algae got bored in the water and moved to the land. Wow, that's a very good thought processes for algae. I wonder if they're still thinking about that today. So then it turned into the non-vascular plants like the mosses and liverworts, and those eventually evolved into the vascular plants. First, the non-seed vascular plants like horsetail and ferns, and then into the seed vascular plants like trees, and then into the flowering plants, which is supposed to be the top of the plant list. There you go. Quick summary of what you learn in school. So, all right. Now I'm going to go through an article here called Kingdom of the Plants Defying Evolution. This is written by Alexander William. Now, Alexander William is a botanist, and so he is interested in this book titled 5 Kingdoms, written by Professor Lynn Margulis. Well, she was a senior author in this book, so there's a couple different authors help doing this book. And she was a professor at the University of Massachusetts. Now, she has spent most of her illustrious 40-year career researching the supposed evolution of the higher forms of life from the lower forms. Now, most biologists study only 1 or 2 areas because of the extraordinary variety and complexity of not just life on Earth, but just within the plant life. All right, but she went ahead and does the whole kit and caboodle there. So Alexander Williams is writing about this book of hers. So when I reading this, it'll say I, and whenever I say I, it's Alexander Williams' speech. Okay, so let's get started here. Until relatively recently, all living things were classified into just 2 great kingdoms, the animal kingdom and the plant kingdom. But in the last decade or so, as a result of studying gene sequences, a revolution has taken place in our understanding of the diversity of life. As a botanist, I was particularly interested in Margula's view of plant classification. In her book, algae, fungi, and bacteria have all been removed from the old plant kingdom, which is put in its own separate kingdom itself. All right. And with the new plant kingdom consisting of just 12 phyla, a phylum is a large grouping with certain features in common of multicellular, green, mostly land-dwelling plants. And I have a thing here of the 12 here. So we've got the old plant kingdom was structured to reflect supposed evolutionary relationships between plant groupings. However, the alleged sequence of evolution of various plants contradicted their actual order of burial in the fossil record. not to mention the complete absence of any fossilized transitional forms. So what was going through here, see, the algae turned into the Bryata forms here, but according to the fossil record, okay, here's the algae, here's the Bryata, and here, okay, these are the non-vascular, and then starting of the vascular. Well, look, we have the ferns, which is the seedless vascular plants here, coming way before the non-vascular, the Bryata, all right? So they're completely opposite in the fossil record. If these guys came from these guys, it should be the opposite. All right, so there's a big problem in that. So let's keep reading. So as I read Margulis's revised descriptions, I was asking myself, does this revision improve the case for the evolutionary origin of plants? Well, the answer is not at all. In fact, it strengthens the case for special creation. The plants are now divided into just two main groups, the Bryata, which are the non-vascular plants, those which do not have specialized plumbing for water transport, and the Trachyata, right here, all right, which are the vascular plants, those which do have specialized plumbing for water transport. And within that group, we have the seedless and the seed plants. All right. My first observation was that the Bryata are the simplest, and if evolution were true, they should be the ancestors of the Trachyata. Thus, according to evolutionary long-age interpretations, they should be found first in the fossil record, buried below the Trachyata, but no, the opposite is true. The Trachyata appear first. Now, the Bryata consist of three groups: the mosses, the liverworts, and the hornworts. All right. There is nothing that could logically be their ancestors among the multicellular algae or fungi. Their nearest supposed relatives are among the chlorophytes, because these guys are the chloroplasts, which is in all the plants. So they assume that these must be them. But the 12 phyla of the new plant kingdom excludes the chlorophytes, the nearest, quote, living ancestor candidates. So those are excluded. Despite mosses being well represented in the fossil record, there is no joy for evolutionists. Margulis had to admit they do not seem to be the ancestors of the vascular plants. Uh-oh. Or of the hornworts and liverworts. Like hornworts and mosses, liverworts gave rise to no other plant lineage. The hornworts appear before the mosses in the fossil record, but the origin of the hornworts cannot be deduced by examining the fossil record. Hornworts, mosses, and liverworts probably evolved independently of one another. So here, supposedly at the base of the evolutionary tree, there is no evidence whatsoever of evolution. This is not merely a missing link problem, but a yawning chasm. And none of the simplest plants, the Bryata, are ancestral either to one another or to any of the higher plants. Climbing further up the supposed evolutionary tree, Margulis next deals with the Xylophyta, or the whisk ferns. Once again, no intermediate fossils have been found. Chloroplast DNA, remember these are the chloroplasts, all right? Their DNA suggests that xylophytes' closest relatives are non-lycophyte vascular plants such as the ferns. All right? But the chemical evidence fails to support a strong evolutionary relationship between the xylophytes and the ferns. Ancestral groups for the xylophytes are unknown at present. So more evidence that the Trachyata did not evolve from the Bryata. Supposedly next to appear in the alleged Carboniferous coal forests were, now listen to this, the tree-like 130-foot lycopods. All right, but lycopods are neither related to pines and cedars or to mosses. Although they have an excellent fossil record, it gives absolutely no clue as to where they came from. Now, these are called club mosses. Oops, there they go. Club moss. They call them club moss, but they're not related to mosses. They look like they have pine-type leaves, but they're neither related to the pines. So, I wanted to kind of show you that there. All right. All right, bear with me. I have like my budget so low, there's no budget. So this is what we're going to get with that. All right. Okay. Now, where was I at? Supposedly next to appear. Okay, we did the lycopods. All right. Margulis next deals with the horsetail. We've all seen horsetail. They're all over the place. Surviving today only as the single herbaceous genus Equestium, which probably means horsetail. Once again, there is an excellent fossil record. Abundant fossil specimens of, again, tree-like 50-foot horsetails are buried in layers labeled Devonian and Carboniferous, but ancestral groups for horsetails are unknown at the present. What about the ferns? All right. Fossilized ferns abound in the fossil record from the Carboniferous through the present, with some, again, tree ferns up to 82 feet tall. But again, not a single clue here to their origin. A lot of super tree-like plants that are not even close to being tree-like today. Now, I talked about in the earlier show about what Earth may have looked like before the flood. You might want to think about that. Go back, if you haven't seen that video, go back and look through it. It's just the video before, show 5. And we've got some fossil records showing how large these plants were back then. All right, so climbing the evolutionary ladder, we come to the gymnosperms, or naked seed plants, and they include the 4 living phyla. All right, here's where it's falling down. The cycads, there we go. The ginkgo, the pines, there we go, and the needlephytes, the ugliest plants on earth. There we go. All right, now the cycads are well known as garden plants. And the group includes the sago palm. Cycads were once considered to be the oldest living relatives of the flowering plants. Well, like you don't know what flowering plants are. All right, there we go. Okay. Related through their common ancestor, the extinct seed ferns. However, seed ferns and the living cycads are no longer believed to be direct ancestors of flowering plants, and there is no hint as to their supposed evolutionary origin. The ginkgo tree is represented by a single living species, Ginkgo biloba, in a single genus, in a single family, in a single class, in a single phylum. Its fossil history extends down to Permian rocks, and it appears there were once many more species. But here again, they appear suddenly and fully formed, leaving evolutionists with no clue as to their origin. The conifers or pine trees range from ground creeping shrubs to the sequoia redwoods of California. probably the largest living things on the planet, reaching up to 380 feet in height and 26 feet in diameter. Conifers likely descended from, listen to this, the progymnosperms. Progymnosperms? Sorry. And what are the progymnosperms? Imaginary evolutionary ancestors. There is no evidence that they ever existed. And are the conifers the ancestors of anything? Conifers gave rise to no other plant phyla. Last of the gymnosperms is the curious group Cnidophytes. If you can see that hopefully in there. All right. The Cnidophytes consist of 3 vastly different genera, Ephedra, Netum, and Welwitschia. They share some characteristics with other gymnosperms and some characteristics with flowering plants. Unfortunately for evolutionists, they also appear fully formed in the fossil record, just as vastly different as they are today. So there is no fossil evidence of their evolutionary lineage before they appeared, nor after, for Cnidophytes are believed not to have given rise to any other plant lineage. Finally, supposedly at the top of the plant evolutionary tree, we come to the flowering plants. All right, put that there. Why not? All right. The Anthophyta, or angiosperms, with their unique flowers and fruits. They are the superstars of diversity and abundance, with possibly as many as 1 million species occurring all over the globe. They have an abundant fossil record, but once again, they appear fully formed with no sign of any evolutionary lineage. The only suggestion from Margulis and her co-author is the neophytes. But since neophytes are believed not to have given rise to any other plant lineage, they have to imagine what an ancestor of flowering plants might have looked like. In a blind leap of evolutionary faith, they surmise that the incredible intricate flower structures we see today, complete with ovary, female, and pollen, male, exist because evolution has modified leaves into shoot specialized for reproduction. Yet, there is not even a fragment of fossil evidence for this at all. Well, there we have it. The plant fossil record is now more clearly defined than ever before, and it testifies more clearly than ever before that not one of the phyla is either the ancestor or the descendant of any other. Once more, the evidence of the real world is seen to be consistent with the truth of Genesis. Plants reproduce according to their kind. That is, ginkgos have consistently produced ginkgos. Dun, dun, dun. Pines have consistently produced pines, wisp-ferns, wisp-fers, mosses, mosses, all the way down to all the flowering plants. All right. Ever since the Creator spoke them to an existence to reproduce after their kind. They don't tell you any of that in school. Now, what about the fossil record? All right. Dr. Colin Patterson, a senior paleontologist at the British Museum and editor of the prestigious scientific journal, Patterson is a well-known expert having an intimate knowledge of the fossil record. He was unable to give a single example of macroevolution transition in his book titled Evolution. He stated, "You say that I should at least show a photo of the fossil from which each type of organism was derived? I will lay it on the line. There is not one such fossil for which one could make a watertight argument." Next is David B. Kitts, who is a doctor of zoology, and he's also the head curator of the Department of Geology at the Stovall Museum. In an evolutionary trade journal, he wrote, Despite the bright promise that paleontology provides a means of seeing evolution, it has presented some nasty difficulties for evolutionists, the most notorious of which is the presence of gaps in the fossil record. Evolution requires intermediate forms between species, and paleontology does not provide them. In Herbert Nilsson, a famous botanist, evolutionist, and professor at Lund University in Sweden, says this: "My attempts to demonstrate evolution by an experiment carried on for more than 40 years have completely failed. The fossil material is now so complete that it has been possible to construct new classes, and the lack of transitional series cannot be explained as being due to scarcity of material. The deficiencies are real. They will never be filled." All right, now speaking of the Cambrian fauna, there are many that still survive, all looking much like they did over 500 million years ago. We talked about some of these. All right. The prominent British evolutionist Richard Dawkins has made the following comment: "And we find many of them already in an advanced state of evolution, the very first time they appear. It is as though they were just planted there without any evolutionary history." Should I say Genesis 1:11? All right. Needless to say, this appearance of sudden planting has delighted creationists. Well, I should say so. Now we go to Darwin's own words on his Origins of Species, Chapter 6. "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down." DNA had not yet been discovered when Darwin wrote his book. He believed that a cell in its simplest form was just that, simple. For his theory to work, it had to be. Otherwise, how could a vastly complex cell simply rise from a batch of primordial soup? Today we know otherwise. Even the most simplest cell is extremely complex, and there is no way it could have simply evolved from soup. Yet against Darwin's own words, we hold to his theory, or I should say secular scientists hold to his theory as being correct. Now, evolutionists would like you to believe they have science behind their theories. All right? But evolution is nothing more than the atheist religion of origins neatly concealed as science. Well, so is biblical creationism, the Christians' religion of origins, you say. And we say yes. But we don't hide the fact that it is by faith that we believe. Even the God of the Bible does not hide the fact that faith plays a role. Hebrews 11:3. "Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear." Now the grace of faith has a retrospect as well as prospect. It looks not only forward to the end of the world, but back to the beginning of the world. By faith we understand much more the formation of the world than ever could be understood by the naked eye of natural reason. Now faith is not a force upon the understanding, but a friend and a help to it. The Bible gives us the truest and most exact account of the origin of all things, and we are to believe it, and not to undermine or compromise the scripture account of creation because it does not fit in with some fantastic hypothesis of so-called experts who deny the existence of God. Back to Romans 1:21 and 22. And I will end with this. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were they thankful, but become vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools.